segment is brought to you by In the Know with Wealth Management Group, hosted by Craig Bolanos. Heard Sunday mornings at 10.
Listen to podcasts of Joe Walsh and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and we heard from Mayor Lori the Lightfoot last evening, right before the Bears game. Nice appetizer.
Pre-game warm-up.
Her State of the City speech, in which she said a number of things. We're going to roll up our sleeves to pursue a growth strategy of investing in people so we can move forward together and transform our future. What does any of that mean? Nobody knows.
I believe the children are our future.
Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. I agree. That's what we should do. That's where the greatest love of all is to be found.
Right.
It's right inside you, Amy.
I know. I just got to dig deep because she did ask for our help. She's like, we're going to need help.
Not
We've
love,
got a problem.
money.
We have and will continue to explore every reasonable option. And reasonable, to me, means relieving the financial burden on those least able to afford it and not driving business out of Chicago. These two principles will guide my decision-making about revenue options. As your mayor, I cannot in good faith promise you that I will take any option off the table to tackle this crisis, whether it's through budget reductions or by raising revenue. But what I can tell you is that I will work tirelessly to ensure whatever options we take will be made with transparency and with working folks in mind. And on this, we have already gotten started.
I'm getting sleepy.
We are committed to a graduated real estate transfer tax.
Can't even say it without
this will bring relief to homeowners whose houses sell for under $500,000, while owners with higher valued homes will pay more of their fair share. We are committed to addressing homelessness and housing instability and putting real resources towards these problems.
Yeah. Okay. And we're also committed to making sure that Chicago continues to enjoy its projected status in calendar year 2019, which is the worst housing market of the top 200 metro markets in the country. Worse than Cleveland. Worst housing market of the top 200, according to Realtor.com. She's also going to ensure that we continue to hemorrhage residents, which only makes the matters worse. Over the last 30 years, Chicago's lost 300,000 residents, while hiking spending 60%. The city's pension funds, collectively 27% funded, according to the Illinois Department of Insurance. $9.9 billion in assets, $37.5 billion in liabilities. That's a problem.
Oh, my gosh.
40 cents of every tax dollar spent by the city of Chicago today will go to servicing debt. When Detroit filed for bankruptcy, pensions similarly made up 40% of its annual budget. And the response from Lori is the same as the response from the injured Governor Jellybelly, which is sell the false story, the terrible policy.
Casinos are going to make it all better.
That's part of it. We're going to tax the top 1 or 2% and provide relief to the bottom 98 or 99%. That's what Pritzker is doing at the state level with the graduated state income tax, and that's now what Lori Lightfoot has just committed to in her State of the City address with the progressive real estate property taxes, progressive property taxes. Crater the market. And by the way, Richard Porter, who's actually an attorney, Kirkland and Ellis downtown, but he's also the Republican National Committeeman for the Illinois GOP. He's one of the few people in the Republican Party that can actually put cogent thoughts together and has some political courage. He has a piece in RealClearPolitics.com. Who will Chicago tax if the rich say enough? And when you're talking about hammering people $500,000 and up, those people who've already left Illinois and are residents somewhere else, but they keep a place in Illinois because they have some means.
Right.
But because they're well-to-do, they have nice places in Illinois. And by the way, condos aren't cheap in Chicago in the few revenue-producing wards that still exist. So now you're telling them to get the hell out, too. Don't keep a place here. Nice place to visit, stay in a hotel. Don't buy property here. You have to be out of your mind to buy property in Illinois. if you want anything resembling a return on investment. If you want to watch your equity being termited away by politicians, then please, by all means, buy. Remarkable. It's a remarkable speech. There was nothing in it except stringing together of refrigerator magnet aphorisms that you hear from every politician in the state for the last 50 years, which I know we love because we keep electing those politicians who communicate in this style. The only specific thing was that progressive property taxes. That'll do it. That'll do it. $838 million budget deficit this year, so she says. But more importantly, the structural debt that Chicago and by extension Chicago residents are carrying. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Ted Dabrowski, who's president of wirepoints.com. They have written extensively on city finances and many other public policy topics in Chicago and Illinois. Ted, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
Well, give us your top line takeaways from Mayor Lurie.
Well, number one is she had no plan, and she's expressed no plan of how to fix the city budget while she was a candidate or this whole first 100 days. And what we learned last night is she still has no plan at all. Number two, it felt like in the end she was just warning everybody that if she doesn't get Springfield's help, she's going to have to do another massive property tax hike. And, that's scary in and of itself because Rahm, did a record tax hike under his watch. And I think number three is, she doesn't really understand the numbers. And, you can talk all about her politics and all that, but I think she just doesn't get how big the problem is. And, when you get down to it, Chicago has more debt than they can ever pay off. It's impossible to pay off. And it'll only happen when they pass a big when the state passes an amendment to the constitutional clause that protects pensions, right. And until then, it's not fixable. So she's not going to take on the unions. She's only going to shove more taxes onto the ordinary Chicagoan, and that spells big trouble.
What are the possibilities of filing for bankruptcy, going the way of Detroit?
Well, right now there's no state law that allows for bankruptcy, so they don't have a choice of bankruptcy, but that doesn't mean that Chicago can't become insolvent. And when you look at all the numbers, and Dan threw out a few of them, when you look at the numbers for pensions and how unfunded they are, the police pension, the fire pension, the municipal pension, they are so broke that they really have very little money. And what everybody's forgetting is that at some point we're going to have a recession. I don't know when that is, but Chicago has zero preparation for a recession. And when that thing comes, it's all going to, everybody's going to figure out how bad things are. And then, if Chicago can't go bankrupt, it could be insolvent, and that will create huge chaos. And it'll, the fixes will be forced upon us under chaos rather than under a real plan from professional politicians.
A report you did in Wire Points calls on Lightfoot to push for a pension amendment to the state constitution rather than tax hikes. But even were she to do that, that's going to come too late for pensions that are 25% funded, particularly if there's an economic downturn, as you were just suggesting, in the near term. But rather than that, why shouldn't she, and rather than asking for bailouts from the state, why shouldn't she just go down to Springfield and ask for the state to authorize a Chicago bankruptcy and reorganization?
Well, I think that would be the best, but I think that's the least likely I think she'll get from Springfield and from Madigan and Pritzker. She's not going to get anything from Madigan and Pritzker, to be honest. But what she needs to be is an agent of change, because there is no voice of reform in Illinois, and she kind of had that chance, maybe still has it, that chance to be that reformer, the one that goes against the system. I have my doubt that she'll ever do it, but she has a chance. And probably the one thing that in every city in the state needs it. We need an amendment to the pension clause so we can do things like freeze COLAs for a long time. I think that would be a big help. But she could go ask for bankruptcy, but probably nobody's going to allow that yet. And probably the courts wouldn't allow it either. They probably say there's still room for another tax hike. So she could do that, and it would be, we would argue that Chicago is already bankrupt. There's no way it can ever pay down its debts. But the amendment might be the first step.
Yeah, and so is the state. But I mean, with respect to bankruptcy, look, I mean, she did the rap last night I inherited this mess. It's the worst ever. It's worse than we thought. The
Help me.
usual, blame the previous guy sort of strategy because you don't know what to do, as you were suggesting. And I agree with you that she doesn't, and she doesn't have the courage to know to do what it actually is required, and take that rhetorical position. The concern that, of course, the politicians are going to have is you're going to have a run on local units of government declaring bankruptcy. Well, and that would necessarily implicate public sector unions and those pension benefits, and everybody's going to take a haircut the same way they did in Detroit. But you could also visit much of the punishment on bondholders, and that wouldn't bother me, and I don't think it would bother a lot of Democrats too, except for those that have those cozy relationship with the bond houses and the bond council.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. I don't think anybody would have a problem with the bondholders taking a hit. I tell you that the interesting thing about Illinois, in particular, and in Chicago too, is that the bondholders are a small part of the problem. The pension debt just grossly outweighs the bondholders. So really, the pain's going to have to come by ending pension plans as we know them. Just end them, and going forward, we move to a defined contribution type plan. And the other thing is we've got to just freeze COLAs, because that's the most expensive thing. And freezing COLAs for the medium term will do a lot to reduce the liability. But what's interesting is that Lightfoot already said the city can't pay these debts. When she went to Pritzker and asked for a state takeover of the pensions, she had admitted it then that Chicago can't handle its debts.
But then she
so
lied.
You're right. She could.
But then she
lied.
lied.
The next step.
She lied last night when she pretended that pension funds that are 25% funded are salvageable. They're not. It's just a matter of time. And I mean, don't believe me, believe actuarial tables. I mean, believe the Department of Insurance filings by these actual pension funds. Those pension funds are going away, unless there is truly evasive action. You can't come back from 25% and less funding levels.
Yeah, and there's another way to look at it, and I'll flip it for you for a minute. But just one other thing I want to point out beforehand. There's too much hypocrisy in all this too. Or maybe it's expected, obviously, but you can't say that you need a state takeover of pensions and then turn around and hand the CTU a 5-year, 25% raise over that 5 years. It's ludicrous. But let me just make this point, Dan, and I think the best way to say it, I'm trying to show this. When you add up all the debt that Chicago has for pensions and all that, and retiree health care, and you take a household in Chicago, it's got overlapping governments on it, right? The state, Cook County, the Water Reclamation District, Chicago Public Schools, the city government. And you add up all those pension debts, according to Moody, on average, each single household is on the hook for $145,000 in debt.
Right.
That's like giving somebody a mortgage, saying, here's $145,000, good luck. Now, the thing is that half of Chicago households make less than $50,000 a year, so most could never take on that. So the real debt per household is massive. It's more like $400,000 per household. Forget it, unpayable.
But there's nobody is going to act on it, and no politician will therefore be held accountable until you have a cataclysmic event. Don't you believe? Until you have a pension fund actually unable to pay out current beneficiaries to a large group of retirees that are politically powerful, the teachers, the firefighters, the police, something like this.
Yeah, it's going to happen, right? Police and fire pensions, I forget which one, is 17% funded. It's got like nothing left in it. And if you get that recession and stock market drop of some kind, that thing's over. It's done. And but nobody's going to react until a few things happen, right? The bond market stops financing Chicago. We're already in junk rating, so there's risk there. Number two, you get more people leaving, right? And that's easy for things to happen. More people leave Chicago, then it's and fewer people coming in. Add those things up, and the crunch will come.
I wanted to get your reaction. You heard what I had to say about her one specific, which was the progressivity of property taxes. I wanted to get your reaction to what that would mean for Chicago.
Well, so there's the when you look at the progressivity of everything she's trying to do, and when I just discussed that half of the people in Chicago make less than $50,000, so all these debts, no matter how they come, it's going to come through income taxes. It's going to come through the progressive real estate tax, progressive income tax. There's a lot of wealthy people who are going to say, I'm not going to do it. I don't get enough services. I'm not respected here. There's not a long-term future, not to mention what all these taxes are doing to home values. And you mentioned it. People's home values are people's nest eggs have been, in relative terms, destroyed compared to if you lived in another city. So why are they going to keep putting up with it? And I think at the margin, we're going to lose wealthy people, and at the margin, we're not going to gain wealthy people. And that's going to be a double whammy that Chicago will not be able to handle.
Well, and it's even worse than that, right? Not just those that have accumulated wealth now, but also the upwardly mobile, the 35 to 54-year-olds in the prime of their career that are pulling up stakes and leading the exodus because they just don't see a future here for themselves and their kids.
Well, and I think when you look at all that, you start to look at, when property values go down, you have less wealth here. Then what's going to happen is these effective property tax rates are going to be really high, and people are going to say it's not worth it. And it's a spiral. We're in a spiral, and until we do something bold, I said this yesterday. Lightfoot inherited the worst, economic fiscal crisis of anybody in the state, and so she needs the boldest reforms that she could ever come up with. And what she put out last night was lukewarm milk toast. She needs to be bold if she really wants to fix things.
And there's just no appetite for it among the ruling class or those that prop up the ruling class, it doesn't appear. But we'll see. Ted Dabrowski, president of wirepoints.com. Make that a regular site you visit if you want thoughtful